Donald Trump's Truth Social post declaring effective immediately the U.S. Navy would begin blockading any and all ships entering or leaving the Strait of Hormuz, while boasting the military is locked and loaded to finish up. What's left of Iran reads less like a coherent national security strategy and more like the distilled essence of MAGA governance. Maximalist bravado, minimalist planning, and a casual indifference to the legal, military, and economic consequences that would land on everyone else. Even in the friendly framing of a cable news discussion, the most important admission comes quickly and plainly: a blockade is not a slogan, it's an act of war. Start with the basics. Trump's post skips entirely. A blockade isn't a strongly worded press release. It's a sustained, enforceable military operation in an international choke point, one that the world's energy supply chain treats as a critical artery. In the segment you provided, Admiral James Stavridis, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, doesn't romanticize it. He calls it not trivial work, emphasizes that the United States has historically been a champion of freedom of navigation, and warns that conducting a blockade carries grave consequences. He even sketches the scale of force it would plausibly require: multiple carrier strike groups, a substantial number of surface combatants, and coordination with regional navies, because the mission isn't just show up and declare victory. It's about controlling a contested space where the other side has every incentive to respond in ways that are cheap, deniable, and destabilizing. This is the first dirty truth Trump world never wants to say out loud. Escalation is easy to announce and hard to control. In MAGA politics, escalation is a brand. It signals dominance. It communicates that the leader is tough. But in real geopolitics, escalation triggers counter-escalation, and Iran's toolkit is built precisely for that. The discussion in your text lays out the menu: smuggling to run a porous blockade, mining operations to raise the cost of maritime traffic, and cyber operations potentially aided by other sophisticated actors that can disrupt logistics, shipping, insurance, port operations, and even domestic infrastructure. This isn't hypothetical hand-waving. It's the lived reality of how asymmetric warfare works in a modern networked economy. And that economy piece is where Trump's blockade threat morphs from reckless to profoundly irresponsible. The Strait of Hormuz is not some remote chessboard square that only the Pentagon and Tehran notice. It's a global pricing mechanism. If you meaningfully interrupt traffic through that corridor, whether by your own interdiction or by scaring the market into paralysis, you don't just hurt Iran, you spike risk premiums, push energy prices upward, and unleash cascading shocks across supply chains. The segment explicitly references painful domestic consequences already being felt: gas prices, broader commodity impacts, and knock-on effects hitting other economies, while also questioning the internal logic of blockading the strait as a path to opening it. That critique is devastating because it exposes the hallmark of Trumpian foreign policy: confusing force with strategy. A blockade also detonates the legal framework Trump pretends doesn't exist. Calling it an act of war isn't rhetorical flourish. It's a recognition that interdicting shipping in an international waterway is a grave step under international law and would typically require a clear legal basis and broad diplomatic coordination to avoid turning the United States into the very thing it claims to oppose. A state that disregards freedom of navigation when its politically convenient Trump's America First posture routinely collides with the fact that U.S. power has rested not just on ships and missiles, but on legitimacy, on alliances, rules, predictable commitments, and the credibility that we don't just rewrite norms whenever a president wants a viral moment. That credibility problem is even sharper in the latter part of your transcript. One speaker points out how threatening NATO, picking fights with allies, or engaging in erratic intimidation campaigns, even unrelated ones, reduces the very coalition support the U.S. might need in a crisis. That isn't an abstract elite concern. It's operational reality. Coalitions share intelligence, provide basing access, help with maritime security, contribute capabilities, and critically share political risk. When a president treats allies like props or punching bags, he may still order U.S. forces into danger, but he does it with fewer partners, less legitimacy, and greater strain on American personnel. That's not strength. That's unilateral overreach dressed up as patriotism. Then there's the internal contradiction MAGA can never resolve. Trump promises peace through strength, but he consistently chooses actions that make peace less likely and war more probable. Announcing a blockade effective immediately while boasting the military is locked and loaded is not diplomacy, it's coercion without an off-ramp. Even if you believe economic pressure can be a tool, as Admiral Stavridis suggests, placing a blockade somewhere between doing nothing and total destruction, coercion only works when paired with clear objectives, credible terms, and a diplomatic pathway that lets the adversary de-escalate without regime suicide. Trump's posture, as described here, offers none of that. It offers humiliation and maximal threat. That's a recipe for retaliation, not capitulation. The segment also includes a particularly grim irony, discussion of sanction policy and the idea that relaxing pressure can funnel resources to an adversarial regime, framed here with a specific dollar figure and the claim of upside-down policy. Whether or not every number in cable news debate survives scrutiny in a footnoted report, the underlying dynamic is real. Middle East strategy is brutally sensitive to incentives. You can't credibly claim you're strangling a regime while simultaneously making choices that reduce pressure or create financial breathing room. But Trump's approach tends to be the inverse problem. He uses maximum pressure as performance art, public threats, chest-thumping declarations while neglecting the steady, unglamorous work of multilateral enforcement, intelligence coordination, sanctions architecture, and allied diplomacy. In other words, he wants the optics of strength without the competence that makes strength effective. This is where the Democratic critique becomes not just ideological, but practical. Serious national security is boring on purpose. It's planning, law, alliances, restraint, and clarity. Trump's posture is the opposite: impulsive, personalized, and publicity-driven. He treats the U.S. military like a megaphone for his ego and treats global commerce like a bargaining chip for domestic political theater. And because MAGA politics trains its audience to confuse intimidation with leadership, the danger is that people mistake the adrenaline rush of a threat for the substance of a strategy. Finally, consider what this kind of announcement does to the American public. It normalizes the idea that a president can casually declare steps that amount to war with immediate global economic consequences in the voice of a social media post. That's not strong leadership. That's a breakdown of democratic accountability. In a constitutional republic, decisions that risk war, especially ones as escalatory as a blockade, should be debated, justified, and bounded by law. The entire point of checks and balances is to prevent exactly what Trump keeps trying to do: concentrate life and death decisions in one man's impulses, then dare the country to clean up the mess later. So if you strip away the macho language, what's left is an ugly reality. A Hormuz blockade isn't a move so much as a fuse. It would demand massive resources, invite asymmetric retaliation, inflame global markets, strain alliances, and expand a conflict that already has too many paths to disaster. Even the experts in your transcript, people not exactly allergic to military power, treat it as a dangerous gamble. Trump's post treats it as a flex. That contrast tells you everything about the MAGA approach to the world. Big promises, big risks, and no respect for the consequences that other people will pay.